Welcome, everyone, to another podcast episode of Beyond Your Circumstances. I am super excited today because we have another great guest, and I'm just rolling in the punches here because we've had Zanny, we've had Jenny, and now we have Deb, who's going to bring some more goodness to the conversation today. So I'm going to give her quick little intro as I do with everybody. Deb Harrison is a growth and change catalyst and kindness advocate, helping individuals and organizations to improve well-being and performance. In addition to being a powerful writer and speaker, her service spans from coaching and facilitation to planning and training. And she's worked with several different industries such as Johnson and Johnson, AARP, McDonald's, the list goes on. So you'll know more about her as I put all her information in the show notes. Be sure to go over there after this podcast episode. But I just want to give a huge welcome. Deb, thank you so much for being here and having a great conversation today.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited because we've had opportunities to have some conversations offline and a little bit live also. So it's a continuation of those things that we've talked about. And I'm curious to see where it's going to take us today.
Yeah, awesome. So Deb is a mom of three, right? Am I
That is
right?
correct. Yep. 3 teenagers.
So she's a little in a different realm than me because I have three toddler school age and she has them much older, but she has her own experiences and things that she can share. So I want to give you the stage here right now. And maybe if you feel led to give an experience or maybe a challenge that you can really feel like it's influential or help somebody today as they're listening, how you made it through.
That's a good question. So one thing I want to know is because you were saying that we're at different places from parenting perspective, right? Toddlers and teenagers and something that I hadn't expected. And I guess this kind of ties in with the challenge that even though we talk a lot about how children really don't develop until they're, I think it's what, 30, 35, like it's really when the brain stops forming. But I think sometimes like, we talk about like the terrible twos or these different phases that we talk about. And then we talk about, oh, teenagehood is really difficult. And so you've kind of got in your mind these different phases and what they're going to look like based on other people's experience, some of the science behind it, which is all very valid, but how a lot of the things that you kind of think like, okay, this phase is past. So now we're into this phase. A lot of it rolls through and it's less that your child isn't growing up or you're still acting like a child, but it's really just part of the natural flow of development. And I think as much as you can understand that from a scientific perspective, when you're experiencing it, it's very different.
Yes.
So for me, maneuvering through as the kids have gotten older and understanding where is the line between when I step in and intervene, which is different than when they're little, right? You're a little bit more inclined to make sure that they don't trip and fall and things like that. When they're older, it's that same, but it's in a bigger perspective, right? Now they're out in the world and they're doing some of their own things. And at what point do you intervene and kind of like, hey, this is the area that you can stay in, and I'm going to cut you back on this course versus letting them explore. And even when you feel like you are completely prepared for that, it's a challenging experience. So I was saying to somebody the other day, like, feel like a lot of parenting is saying, oh, I could have done that better. Right. Like in hindsight, it's so easy to look back and think of where we could have made changes.
Mm.
So for me, navigating teenagehood, remembering what teenagehood was like for me and not wanting them to have some of the same challenges that I had, but also knowing that they're going to have some of the same challenges that I had because it's the natural part of it. So where do I step in? And a lot of it has to do with these conversations that I have with each individual child. So my children are 18, 16, and 16. We're a remarriage. So the two 16-year-olds are not twins. So not that that's super, super relevant, but I think it's kind of important to note. They all have very unique personalities and perspectives. And even though they've grown up with the same influences, how they've interpreted those and the experiences that they have had outside of the house have been different. And so they've got different views and takes on the world. So I could have a conversation with one of them about a certain topic and think that was a great conversation and try to have the exact same conversation with one of the other children. And it's not the same. What they need to hear and what I need to hear from them are very different. So trying to figure out, like, I talk about change, right, in companies and organizations, but change when it's in your own household and it's with your kids. So I have to really be receptive to hearing from them where they're specifically at, not just from a biological perspective of age, not from my past experience and what I remember of being there, but where their unique perspective is, where they're at, and letting them educate me on the reasons that they feel a certain way before I start to offer advice or guidelines. Or obviously, in some cases, we still, as parents, have the responsibility to say, that's a hard no. So it's I think really it's a give and take, and it's a taking time to be patient and understand where they're coming from. With my daughter specifically, I'm inclined to feel sometimes like I remember she'll share an experience and I'll relate in my mind to something that I went through, but she's not me. It's a very different experience. It's a different time. She's a different person. And understanding where she's coming from and letting her know that, like, I can give you some guidance on what I'm thinking, but I have to be honest that I'm not you. And she respects that a lot, wants to hear that. She doesn't want me to come in and say, like, I've got all the answers for this because I've been there, because I think that almost sometimes feels like an invalidation of her very unique experience. So a lot of quiet time. I take quiet time to pray and be very reflective and discerning. A lot of time I have to take to be quiet and reflective and to make sure I'm thinking through the decisions that I make and how I'm going to offer advice to ensure that I am being open to any of the different factors that could come into place.
So something that popped in my head as you were talking, kind of something I had to deal with, but I'm curious how you dealt with, is the fact of have your own business. And sometimes people who are either in it or wanting to start, they feel that their role as a parent could either hold them back from thriving in their business or maybe it influence them wanting to start a business. So I'm curious for
Mm.
you, maybe it could have been both, maybe it could have been one way or the other. So could you expound on that a little bit on how parenting
Yeah, that's a
influence?
great question. That's actually it's interesting because I remember you had kind of some questions for me to consider beforehand, and I'm remembering now what I had put down as one of my challenges, and it's actually going to tie into this answer. So my journey to entrepreneurship is interesting in the sense that I went to high school, college, became a teacher, and I loved teaching. That was definitely something that I knew that I was going to be good at and that I was going to enjoy. So it wasn't like I was settling for that. But there had been some other things that I had really wanted to pursue, namely writing and photography. So while I was teaching, and I think actually while I was still in college, before I'd even started teaching, I did have a photo, video, and design business, which is interestingly where the D. Harrison PVD of my website originally comes from. It was photo, video, and design. And when I pivoted, I said, like, you know what, I'm going to keep that. So that's kind of a neat little story behind the name. But I was doing this photography business, but while teaching, and it was difficult to maintain it because it would be, and I'd be teaching during the week, and I'd be doing the wedding photography, event photography on the weekends. This was prior to having children. So I'm going to kind of fast forward a little bit. That was more of something that I would do on occasion if people needed something. I wasn't really marketing for it. I wasn't really trying to gain additional clients and things like that because of the fact that once I kind of became a parent, to your point, it was like my whatever you want to call free time may not necessarily be available for that. And when I started or when I became a parent, I went from full-time to part-time teaching. And I had been teaching for several years, so I was a tenured teacher at that time. And when you choose to go from full-time to part-time as a teacher, you sever your tenure. Tenure is the kind it makes it doesn't mean you can't get fired if you're not a good teacher, but it makes it there's a process that has to take place. So when you're tenured, that kind of locks you in that if for example, if the building has cuts or whatever, they're going to go from the last person hired. And shortly after I had moved from that full time to that part time position, the budget got cut at the school. I was now the bottom person because I had done that. And so I had to quickly make a decision on what am I going to do? I was becoming a single parent unexpectedly at that point, which was one of my challenges, and was trying to figure out like how do I give everything attention? And now I needed to figure out how I was going to work. Was I going to go find another job that was going to be out of the house? Was I going to try to and a friend of mine actually was working with a client, and the client was doing website relaunch. She knew that I loved writing, and she said, you could see you coming in and doing some copy editing for this particular client. And as part of the copy editing, I was attending all their meetings to understand what the goals of the client were for this website relaunch, and ended up making some recommendations, and they brought me in and started saying, well, you could probably make some other suggestions. I see a place for you to do more than just copywriting. And at the time, there was a lot of difference. So, like, your question hits right to home, right? There was like, well, how much additional time is this going to take? Because particularly when you're working from home, as you noted, there's first, it's difficult because of distractions. You've got lots of things that are going on in the background. Am I going to be able to navigate how that's going to work from a work environment perspective? And then there's the how much extra time am I going to be taking and how am I going to divide up that time? Because not only am I a parent, but now I'm a single parent. And how am I going to figure out the best way to balance all of that? There's also a lot of that inferiority stuff that starts to come into play, right? I think that because of different feelings that I had emotionally coming through all of what I was going through at that point. Am I really equipped to do this? They're noticing that I have these skills and that I could really be this great consultant, but is that something that I'm equipped to do in the way that they wanted me to? Right? It was a lot of strategic stuff. And it was a financial services company, so it was very critical that you understood all of the different types of things that could go into play when you're making recommendations. And I think the fact that I had just maneuvered into being a single parent actually helped to drive my recognition that, like, I can do this. I can handle change. I can handle different circumstances. This is going to allow me an opportunity for the kids to actually see me doing these things, seeing the ability to pivot when you need to pivot. I liked the thought that I was going to be able to be in the house more. So that definitely helped. Over that time, because that was many years ago, they were little, there have certainly been points at which I've said to myself, am I going to be able to sustain this? As they got older and their needs changed and trying to get through that. But I think so much of it fed into the modeling that I wanted to have for the kids about priorities and about believing in yourself and about persevering through difficult circumstances that it drove me forward. And still to this day, even when it's tough because there's interruptions, teenagers may not have the same asks that little kids have, but they still come to you and they have expectations of assistance from you. That when I have to say no to them, or when I have to say, like, I have to put this on hold because I've got to get this work thing done, assuming it's nothing that's urgent, I think that that's really important for them to see. And it's a lot of conversations that have had to take place. And I think age appropriate. So I think if somebody is becoming an entrepreneur and their children are younger versus becoming an entrepreneur when their kids are older, I do think that there are discussions that have to take place. And I will sit with the kids and I will talk to them about, like, this is, if it's the summer and they're on vacation and I've got a particularly busy schedule today with calls. So I'm going to kind of, like, this is what the schedule looks like today. And I want you to understand while I'm doing this. And I'm not going out to do something fun with you because I don't want to, but it's part of what needs to happen for work. So I think it definitely impacts the way that I make my business choices, but I think my business choices are influenced by the way that I parent and the way that I set priorities and understand communication and that different people are in different places. So that was a big answer for that
Yeah,
question. I
no,
hope.
I loved it. And one of the things that you were talking about was priorities, which I was just having this discussion with someone else on Instagram Live, how too many of us, especially moms, we want to take care of everybody else, ingrained in us, our upbringing or culturally or
Right.
society, that your job is to make sure the kids are taken care of, your spouse is taken care of, your home is taken care of, your finances is taken care of, these different things that we often miss the mark, where it's like, how are we supposed to take care of everybody else if we're not taking care of ourselves? That concept of filling from an empty cup. You can't pour out
Right.
and give when you're not making yourself a priority. But there's also that stigma, like, oh, but you're being selfish. And I've seen it debunked so many times. It's not selfish to make yourself a priority, to
Right.
do that type of self-care, and to be able to be your best for your family, for your business, for all the things that you're trying to achieve in life. So, one of the things I want to ask you is, how do you've mentioned in your form, and I want you to expound a little bit, but how do we tap into that awareness? Because there's so many things coming at us all the time. Things that overwhelm us, and the constant to-do list, the kids yapping it behind our heads, I need that. All of the different things that you mentioned, distractions. How do we tap into that awareness to know, this is what I need to focus on? This is how I take care of myself. This is how I can do more for my family.
Sure. So one of the things I talk a lot about, and this is like individual and for corporate clients, and I love this topic because I think, like, it's a lot of times when people hear planning or scheduling, it sounds very like it confines you, right?
Mm.
And one of the things I'm regularly telling people is that when you set a schedule or a plan, it actually frees you up to push the brake more and look at the view because you're where your things are. And I came into when I was first started consulting, a lot of the projects that I was taking on were project management related, whether I was the project manager or just involved in helping the organization figure out what the project management team was going to look like. And
Mm.
when you make a good a project plan is going to have estimated times, it's going to have priorities, and it's going to also have to take into consideration unexpected things. Because regardless of how tight and clear your project plan is, unexpected stuff is more than likely going to occur because we cannot predict every single way that single thing is going to unfold. So I think for anybody, but particularly as you noted for parents, it's important to have that schedule and that plan in place with all of those variables. Where are your priorities? Where are the time frames that you want to be looking at? And that you've got in there that buffer zone for things that are going to come up unexpectedly, right? Like the child knocking at the door, or there's an event happening at the school that you hadn't expected to happen. And that when you've got that running thing of, oh, here's the buffer thing, some of which you don't know, household emergencies, for example, you can't necessarily predict. You're not going to list out every bad thing that can happen. And actually, I recommend do not list out every bad thing that can happen. There's nothing healthy about that. But you can kind of your emergencies, school events, things, and you have these in the category of what is the priority, right? Is it a concert that's taking place at the school, or is it teachers invited some people to make cookies, right? I'm kind of using simple examples, but I think like you've got to kind of weigh against because there are some things you're going to have to say no to. And as part of that, you also need to consider what you talked about, which is your self care. That shouldn't be after you've completed your project plan or after or outside of your schedule. The self care thing needs to come in. I'm going to be very transparent. I've been doing this for many years, this consulting. And yet, yesterday, my daughter said to me, she walked in, she was like, I don't mean this as an insult, but like, you look kind of terrible right now. Shortly thereafter, my husband came in, was like, you don't look right. And I didn't feel right. I felt awful. My eyes were actually bloodshot. I was exhausted. I had overloaded, despite the fact that I know and teach to people how to make sure that that's not happening. Yet I had overloaded and I was beat. So I put myself to bed. I was like, yep, you're not done. You'll pick up tomorrow morning. I put myself to bed because you're not going to be able to accomplish any of those other things if I'm run down, if I'm sick, if I'm in the hospital. So that's when you put in the self-care. And the priorities of self-care are always going to be that you've got rest, actual rest time, right? Rest time does not include watching. And again, I'm going to use parenting techniques just because I know that's your audience, but like rest time does not include, unless it's restful to you, sitting on the couch watching a cartoon with your child. If that's restful, if you're enjoying it, that's fine. But it's also okay to say that actually still requires energy because a child's squirming all over the place or there's interaction they expect you to do with the show that you're watching. Actual rest time. So you need to be really mindful of what are the things I can do that are restful, right? Completely, whether that's early in the morning or in the evening, middle of the day. Doesn't need to be long, extended periods, but even if it's 5 minutes of time where you're allowing yourself to just rest. Hydration, right? Get those big things of water, put reminders on your phone. You have got to be drinking enough water. Again, I don't always follow through with this, but so those things get put into your plan. So it's not just the like, oh, here's the projects that I'm working on for work. Here's the kids' events. And though like then whatever time I have left over, but you should be doing your scheduling of your client work or your if you work in an office, whatever your schedule looks like and your children's stuff, in addition to making sure that you've got time for nutrition, you've got time for rest, and you've got time for water. And I reassess that on a regular basis, right? So, like, I have a notepad on my desk, and as great as all of the digital tools I use online, I look over my list of what are things that are going on that day. And sometimes something from the bottom will move up because something happened at the end of the day last day, or something that I have on a high priority, but it requires a lot of thought, and I'm not feeling great today. So I know that that's going to take me longer. So it's ever changing process, and we have to kind of comfortable with that the same way we do with managing a project. So I think it's really scheduling and planning what are the priorities that you have and not feeling like that is locking you in, but rather that it's giving you freedom because you're able to make changes and adjust things without feeling all harried in your brain. Like, I don't know what's happening right now. And I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing next. So that's really one of my top tips just for people across the board is to create some structure. You can go outside of it, but that structure is going to make you feel a whole lot better about understanding what you have to do and when it has to be done by.
No, that's really great. I was just saying earlier that my phone is my brain because I can often forget things, and it's not for the fact that losing my memory or anything. It's just that so much distractions just really set you off course. So
Right.
I can be doing something, and this happens to me all the time. Maybe I'm washing the dishes, right? But then my daughter calls me because she can't find her favorite toy. So I'll stop what I'm doing go find her favorite toy, and then realize, oh, yeah, I have to write out a script for something. Didn't finish my dishes, but now I'm on to something. And my brain is
Yeah.
constantly being fired to do something else. So I really have to schedule things for the sake of me being able to actually get them done because of all those distractions that are happening. So I know maybe some people are like, wow, I got to schedule doing my exercise. Well, it might seem silly, but are you getting it done? Are you being intentional with it? Are you
Right.
being consistent? Because if the answer is no, you're not being consistent, you're not getting them done, then it's not silly to schedule it and remind yourself that you made this commitment to yourself. So I'm very with you on that for scheduling things and making sure that because we have so many things going on, we have so many distractions and we can get overwhelmed. And often for me, I don't know if you've experienced this, but like I'm trying to do all the things. I'm just trying to like, I know I got to get this done. I got these priorities and I want it done. But oftentimes, if I have just this running list and I'm so consumed with trying to get it all done, I often don't get anything done.
Right.
It's because of that feeling that I get of overwhelm that it causes inaction.
Right.
Instead of breaking things down and being okay with not getting everything done, but knowing that I got two, three, maybe four things done, that produces more because each day it's like a catapult, like a snowball effect. You're
Right.
actually getting more done because you're taking it at that pace instead of trying to do all the things. And we're not perfect. We're not
Absolutely.
perfect. You have a system, I have a system, but you said the other day you were come down.
Right.
Yesterday, I had a crying day. I said it on my live this morning. I was like, I talk about being positive. I talk about you working on your mindset, but yet yesterday I had one of those hard days. It doesn't happen all the time, but I had one of those hard days and I had to just let myself feel it. I had to just be in the moment. And it actually provided an opportunity for me to be able to sit down, reconnect with some things
Mm.
that I was disconnected from and reconnect with my kids because I was just so overwhelmed by them. And I wasn't tuning into what my child in particular yesterday needed. And we just had to reconnect and be like, mommy had her moment, you had your moment. And let's see what we can learn from this, right? And move forward. And we just hugged, we cuddled. It just felt so much better than being at each other's throats.
Right.
And sometimes you have those days and it's okay, but the biggest thing is to be able to learn and grow from it, not
Absolutely.
stay it.
A
So
couple things you said that I thought were really like, because I remember feeling like you think like you don't want your child to see you stressed out or you don't want your child to see you crying, those things because you feel like they, which to some degree, again, there are some requirements around what you do and don't share in front of your child, but because we feel like we want them to think that we're really, everything's okay. But it's really important for our children to see us cry or be upset in a healthy way and acknowledge that and go, I had a really tough day. Like, I'm really tired right now. I need a few quiet minutes. That doesn't mean you're saying they're not important. It means you're acknowledging and saying, like, I know that I'm not going to be able to effectively communicate, parent in the way that I want to. So I need to take a few moments. And so there's been times where I've lost my cool and I raise my voice and I think horrible, but things come out of your mouth when you're a parent and you lose your patience that are not things that you really are happy about saying. I don't know that I've ever met anybody who's been like, no, that's never happened to me. So I own it, right? Like you say, I'll say to my, like, that was not what I wanted to say. That was not the way I wanted to say it. This is what I was feeling, and talk with them about it because ultimately they're going to need to be able to navigate through those same types of circumstances. And we are creating that modeling for them. And so I let go of the guilt of if my child sees me stressed out about work, I don't want to do that every day. I don't want them to think work is always this negative thing, but I might as well call it out, acknowledge it, and explain, hey, here's what happened, right? Yesterday, I was like, you know what, guys, I overloaded my schedule. I overloaded, I'm exhausted. And the other thing that you were talking about that one of the reasons that I really like the plan is like you said, are people getting things done? Are you being consistent? And so again, I'm going to relate it to the project management component of this, right? So one thing I like to do when I have a project plan and it's got a task list when I'm working with clients is I usually have some type of rule where when you mark something as completed, it turns green. We like the color green. We think of it as go, right? So there's a lot of positive associations with it. And people will get really excited about that, clicking the item and seeing it go green. And why? Because we're taking a moment to acknowledge something that just got completed, however minuscule it might seem in the overall picture. And so that's the same thing with project plans and schedules for ourselves. So maybe we don't call it a project plan when it's in our own life, but it's a plan of sorts, right? Is taking that moment to acknowledge the things that we get done. I refer to it as the push and pause of accountability, right? Accountability makes us go, oh, I got to get this done because I told myself I was going to do it, or I told this person I was going to do it. So I want to get it completed. But accountability also allows us the moment to go, hey, look what I did. Look at what I just got accomplished. Right. So it's important to take moments to recognize those and to do things like I'm a big fan of star charts for adults. You put a little gold, gold star charts. When I
Yeah.
was a kid, used to be like you got your chore done or you did something, you put the little star on the chart to create those types of things. And when you get that done, so if it's a spreadsheet where you can click it off and it turns green, or if it's crossing it, physically crossing it off your list, is it putting a sticker on a chart? Is it calling somebody and being like, hey, I just got that assignment done? But acknowledging all of those incremental things, which allows you to feed into the I am making progress. So when you're in the middle of all of those crazy things, like noted, and you are getting things done, but it doesn't feel like it because all you can feel is the reminders in the back of your head of all the things you need to get done. So you take the time to like, hey, that's not on the list anymore. Even if 10 other things are getting added, you just taken a win. That is so important for you to do and for us to teach our children to do also, whether we're doing the star chart for them or we're letting them put one in their room and having them give themselves a star, right? Self recognition, but acknowledging that those things are happening. A win doesn't have to be you got 100 on the test. The win is you studied and did your best you could on your test.
Yeah, totally. And that something I do with my clients, and I am a weight loss coach. So I work with moms that you struggle with losing the weight. And one thing that I tell them all the time is to celebrate every little win.
Right.
So it might not be that you lost 3 pounds this week or whatever your expectation is, because we all carry these kinds of expectations when we're trying to achieve something. But if you were good with maybe tracking what you ate for the day, then great. That's something that you couldn't do before, but you did it. You did it today, and you did it consistently for the past 5 days. Or you showed up to the live workout. You do live workouts with them. And it's like some people have a hard time. But you know what? You showed up. You showed up. You need to celebrate that because that matters. That matters because before it was something that was so hard for you to do or something that you thought you couldn't do. You have a client, she's so funny because you'll do certain moves or whatever, and she's like, I can't do it as fast as you, or I can't lift as heavy as you, or whatever it is. And I'm like, girl, you don't need to keep up with me. The fact is that the matter is that you showed up and you didn't give up. So what
Right.
you did 5 pounds, right? But you
Right.
still did it. You still made it through the thing. So what? You had to do the modification of that exercise. You still did it. That's what matters. And so I say, celebrate that. Give yourself that little pat in the back. Be proud because every little step leads to a bigger step. And
Right.
that's what's going to bring progress. That's what's going to show results.
Right. Yeah, acknowledging that. You're so right. And acknowledging where our place is. Like you said, you don't have to keep up with me, right? Like, everybody's gonna have a different thing. Like I'm not gonna hand you my plan and it's not gonna necessarily work for you. What steps you take and how you do it. So that's why even when I talk about a project plan or a schedule and people be like, do you have a template? And I'm like, well, I can give you a template, but I think it's the first thing that we should do is figure out what's gonna work for you. Because if you try to take the template of some things and you try to put it into your life and it doesn't really fit for you, you're going to feel disjointed. It's not going to feel natural, and you're inclined to get maybe more stressed at the worst. At the very least, it's not necessarily going to move you forward. So you've got more ability to be self-aware and determine what you need than most people think they do. Most people, when they meet with a therapist or they meet with a coach, they're thinking that the person that they're meeting with is going to somehow be the person that's going to tell them this is where your obstacles are. But most of the time, what do we all know about that? Whether you're working with a coach or you're working with a therapist, it usually comes out of your own mouth. You're usually like, well, this is what, and then you're like, oh, yeah, that's where my problem is, right? So we just need to let go of the feeling that somebody else is going to have the answers and that we're really born very capable of uncovering and discovering and bringing out the best in ourselves.
It's so true. And one of the things that comes back a lot is that that negative thought, even when we're doing well, maybe we have some good momentum in our business, our weight loss, whatever it is. And then that one day, like today, I had a hard day. Those thoughts just come back. They come back, even though for me, I've been working on my mindset for a while. I think about, and I'm going to go back to the Bible. I think about where it says to die to yourself daily, that flesh, because your flesh is always trying to tell you, no,
Mm.
you're not good enough. What do you think you're doing? It comes back like that voice in your ear. And so that's why I'm like so working on our mindset, working spirituality. We have to do this daily. It's without stopping. It's so important because any little thing can stop you in your tracks, try to derail what you're trying to achieve. It's
Yeah.
so important.
I'm a big Matthew 5 fan, various verses, but about the light and what the thing that I think is really important, right? Let your light on, your light, not the person next to you's light, not it's about what are the you're talking about kind of just die to flesh, right? Remove that. And when we do that, when we give in, when we let go of some of those physical temptations that we all face, whatever they may be, and
Mm.
we let the real light of ourselves shine out, right? It's a beautiful, powerful thing. That's where we inspire change in ourselves. That's where we inspire change in others. That's where we really come to accept that we're amazing from the moment that we're born and that
Yeah,
there's no qualifiers needed, right? You don't need the title, you don't need the grade, you don't need the goal. You need to just accept that you're that. And then a lot of times when you're aware of the fullness that you have in being, in the incredible miracle that you are, you lean into the things that you can do more readily and more freely because you have that awareness. You're not searching for something to make you full. You're living the fullness that already exists.
that's amazing. I love that a lot. So I want to wrap up here and ask you if there's any other maybe takeaways or things that you want to share with the audience to inspire them as they go about their day.
Well, aside from encouraging them to work with you if they don't already, and any of the what you said about your specific purposes for folks, I would encourage people to work with you. You definitely you have the skill set, you have the knowledge. There's a heart for it in you that comes across when you're talking about it. You can tell that you're celebrating with all the clients that you work with. For me, that's huge. I want to know that somebody is in it with me and that we're really connected because we are all connected and designed to be connected. So I think that that's one takeaway. I would definitely encourage people to reach out to you if they're looking to increase their health goals, and some of the messages that you said resonate. And then I would just, I think by closing, you talk a lot about kindness. That's one of the things that I do. So it's moved its way from kind of being in the background, right? Like I was a growth and change consultant and I'm working with all these big clients and things. And I was also a nice person. And so people would say like, oh, Deb's so nice. And that was great, right? I liked that acknowledgement, but I realized that the more I talked about it, the more I really wanted kindness to come to the forefront, that's really important to me, to me encourage people to be kind, not kindness that means letting people get away with whatever they want, but being respectful and loving to ourselves and to others. And
Mm.
so I think closing for some of what we were talking about today is asking people to all give themselves that kindness. There are people around them that kindness and really extend the grace of understanding that we're going to make mistakes and then we're going to move forward. And whether you were knowing you need to move about in some type of way and make some changes, or you're already making changes and you're trying to figure your way through them, that you do have the incredible ability to do great things just as you are. And I know that I speak on behalf of Stephanie as well when saying we believe in you and we know that you can do it.
Absolutely. So I know every time I have someone on, I got to highlight them and encourage others to follow you, to know what's going on with what you're doing in your business. How can we follow you? How can we know more about what's going on with your business or maybe something that
Right.
you're offering?
Sure, excellent. So I'm on all of the social media platforms and help people find me where it works best for you. It's at D Harrison PVD on Facebook, at D Harrison PVD on Instagram. I'm less on Twitter, but I am on there as Deb J. Harrison. YouTube is at D Harrison PVD. That's a particular focus for me right now because I'm going to be putting on a lot of video content. So I would love it if people would join there. And in addition to the consulting work, I've mentioned wanting to be, well, I was a writer, have always been a writer, but I mentioned how that's been part of my life since childhood. And I am launching my poetry book in March and would love for people to participate in that in any way, whether they want to buy the book or just spread the word about it, I would love it.
Oh, that's awesome. And I'm going to have Deb give me all the information so I can put it in the show notes, and I'm on YouTube all as well. So it'll be right on there for you guys to grab. But I hope this was encouraging. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. I loved having you, Deb. Thank you so much for being with me today and on the podcast. And I just hope everyone has a blessed day today. And that's it. We made it.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Take care. Bye.